the amount of self-respect you should have is dependent on not just you in your own mind, but how you are and how you fare in your actual social world. So that's an important point to make explicit through all this. Okay, so another summary he gives of the kind of the import or the point of his second principle is this. He says, a central intent of this principle is to try to reduce inequalities in primary or basic social goods and goods that are the source of or ground for distinctions that give one person power or control over another. All right, now this might be my favorite of Nielsen's various attempted explanations of his theory of justice. I think that this passage might come the closest to really kind of laying it all out in a way that's kind of morally attractive. Right, he also says that the second principle is meant as a tool for attaining a state of affairs where there are no considerable differences in life prospects between different groups of people because some have a far greater income, power, authority, or privilege than others. All right, now we're getting towards the end here, but Nielsen does consider an important objection, and here it is. Okay, the objection is that in every society, including what he thinks of as our future classless society, there will be differences among individuals in their abilities, character, gifts, and so forth. Radical egalitarianism, like Nielsen's, so the objection goes, would impose a uniformity which is incompatible with the aspiration for individual self-realization that remains the very basic objective of all humanist thought, including a Marxist humanism. Such radical egalitarianism is destructive of individual freedom. The realization of different individual potential capacities is incompatible with conditions of life that are the same for all. Okay, so I'm not going to flesh out this idea of humanism or Marxist humanism, except to say that the humanistic idea is that we should all kind of human beings should be kind of allowed to or have the conditions that are required for their flourishing, where that might require different things for different people, or at least that's how the concept is applied in this objection. All right, and then Marxist refers to kind of theories that are in some ways similar to the theories of Karl Marx. We're not going to talk about that at all. We just don't have time. Okay, but the basic objection is that if we make things as equal as Nielsen says the just society has to be, we're not going to allow for individual flourishing and self-realization. That should be like one of our main goals in sketching a kind of theory of how society should be. Right? If we're all doing the same stuff and using the same stuff and interested in the same things, then that kind of sucks, right? It prevents the wildflower garden of humanity from growing to its full potential. Okay, now one quick note here, and it's something that Nielsen actually talks about, is that socialism, or even at what he thinks of as communism, can, at least in this tradition, allow for, quote, differentiation on the basis of social roles, but at most it would allow for the development of an elite of spirit, of moral authority, and of taste. Okay, so what Nielsen is saying here is that, look, we don't need to preserve kind of equal status for everybody in every respect, right? We can allow, for example, that like some people will be better or more interesting artists or athletes or posters, right, in this kind of social media age, right? And that's okay, right? Just here's a kind of a trite example of this. Right? No, Nielsen's not saying that like everybody should get the same number of likes on their Facebook posts or Twitter or Instagram posts or whatever. Right? That's not the idea. We can allow, consistently with radical egalitarian justice, these differences in kind of taste or quality or athletics or whatever. That's not a problem. But, right, what we have to be on guard for, and this is what Nielsen's worried about, is we can't allow this differentiation of moral authority or spirit of taste to be a source of political power or control, right? And this is one of the things where Nielsen thinks that the USSR went wrong, was allowing these kind of minor differences between people to become differences in power and control, which he thinks have no place in a just society. Right? So, yeah, so that's one part of Nielsen's response to the objection. His more substantive response is this. He says, my two radical egalitarian principles should make it evident that I do not want to reduce people to a uniform sameness of condition such that they all get the same things, do the same things, have the same interests, and in general behave in the same way. I only claim that once allowances are made for human differences and the like, in a world of moderate scarcity, each individual should have a right to an equal share. Right? So the idea is that there's no presumption here that everybody will like the same things or do the same things. Right? Society needs people to play lots of different roles. Okay? So we're not all going to be doctors or farmers or janitors or whatever, right? We all need to be able to do these different things, and we all need to care. It's fine for us all to care about different things, right? Some people are going to like music more than baseball, and other people are going to be vice versa, whatever. That's all fine, compatible with radical egalitarian justice. It's just that we can't let these differences become differences in control and power, because then that threatens the kind of basic moral principle of equality, as Singer said. Okay, now, in any case, what Nielsen is most concerned to avoid is not income differentials as such, right, but inequality in whole life prospects between members of different classes and strata. With such differences, there exists control, domination, and privilege by one group over another, which makes the lives of some groups quite arbitrarily better and more autonomous than those of other groups. Right, what Nielsen wants instead is what he calls a statusless society. And, quote, essential for there being such a society, not the whole of it, but something without which the rest is impossible, is an equality in political and economic power. It's essential for equal autonomy, and equal autonomy in turn provides the rational basis for equal self-respect. This in turn is necessary if there is to obtain a situation in which there is an equal moral concern for and respect of all human beings. Now this is another one of my absolute favorite passages here, especially because he basically lays out the entire argument of the article in just this little brief passage. Right? So here is, in fact, so there's that passage off on the left, and here is Nielsen's master argument for the whole piece, in my understanding, is my reconstruction. First premise, a just society is one that displays equal moral concern for and respect of all human beings. Okay, and a society that does that is one that Nielsen calls a statusless society. Premise 2, for S, some society, to be a statusless society, it must be rational for each member of that society to have as much self-respect as any other member of that society. Third premise, for it to be rational for each member of the society to have as much self-respect as any other member of that society, each member of that society must have equal autonomy to every other member of S, right? Equal ability to decide what to do and how to live and kind of carry out the necessary means to their decisions. All right, fourth premise, for each member of a society to have equal autonomy to every other member of that society, the members of that society must have equality in political and economic power. All right, finally, premise 5, the members of a society have equality in political and economic power only if that society satisfies Nielsen's two principles. And so we arrive at our conclusion, right? That a society is a just society only if it satisfies Nielsen's two principles. And I think we basically get premises 1 through 4 from just this little passage off on the left in that box. And then premise 5 we get from kind of most of the rest of the article. And so we get our conclusion, right? That justice requires a satisfaction of Nielsen's two principles. Bada bing, bada boom. Now, so now that we have this argument to look at, we know that Nozick denies the conclusion, but where would he get off board? So my hunch is that Nozick would deny the very first premise, Right? I don't think that he would require a just society to be one that displays equal moral concern for and respect of all human beings. I just don't think he would kind of even accept that much. I mean, maybe he could accept it, but then deny premise 2. But in any case, right, Nozick is going to get off board very, very soon at the beginning of this argument to avoid the conclusion. I think a more interesting question here is, where does Rawls get off board? Right? Because, I mean, you guys all read the Rawls. I mean, you should notice, like, Nielsen's argument is all pretty similar to things that Rawls says. So where would Rawls object? Right? Because Rawls, again, denies the conclusion. So I'm sure that Rawls would object to either 3 or 4, but I'm not really sure which. Obviously, I think it's obvious that Rawls would reject 4, but would he also reject 3? Okay, that's a good question. I think I'd like to hear what you all think about that. I think it's a hard